Great. Did you do the intro already?
Okay, so good morning and good afternoon to all our attendees. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Andrea, and I'm happy to introduce today's webinar on organizational effectiveness with Cindy Msomi, the Managing Director at Olwazini Consulting Services, a South African consulting firm. They're experts on providing solutions to gain organizational effectiveness for business sustainability. Cindy is a serial entrepreneur, philanthropist, life coach, and inspirational speaker with more than 15 years of experience working in HR and business operations with a core focus on organizational effectiveness, process management, lean manufacturing, and strategy. As an African entrepreneur and mother, Cindy is passionate about how societies develop their children and groom them to become strong and courageous, and for men to learn from a young age to honor and see women as their equals. Today, she's going to share some of her expertise with us about the concepts of effectiveness, what are the typical challenges and tools to assess your company, and ensure a return on investment you make on organizational improvements. Just to remind everyone to take the most out of this webinar by asking questions, you can type them in your platform's Q&A or chat boxes, and I will be reading them out loud at the end of the session. So please take advantage of that. The question for this webinar is, are you leveraging the maximum of your organization's unique resources to ensure sustainability and growth? If you don't know the answer, this webinar is for you. Cindy will provide some guidance in today's webinar. Welcome, Cindy. The floor is all yours.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening from all parts of the world. Thank you, Andrea, for the wonderful introduction. I do not need to really go into details because Andrea has more than well presented who I am, and I'm honored for her to put it that way. I will tell you at the end why I'm so passionate about organizational effectiveness, but I would like to first give an overview of what the various understanding of an effectiveness model is. A number of people confuse organizational effectiveness with organizational efficiency, which is a model that only looks at the dollar value. In South Africa, obviously the rand value. In whatever part of the world you're dialing from, if it's euro, a euro value. But the effectiveness model looks at a number of issues that you want to look at that would impact on the value, meaning the money that you bring in, that will impact on how well you manage the talent that you have in the business, as well as the environment that you want to create within your business space. In an overall nutshell, how I view organizational effectiveness is a representation of those business assets or processes that you use to create value for you. Value for a business is, at the end of the day, the money you make, but again, the impact that you leave in the society that you're trying to operate in, the impact to your clients, and the impact to the world at large. It also, for me, the effectiveness model looks at assessing and modifying those assets and processes to create that value as a whole. Am I still audible? Okay.
Yes, you are. Continue.
To summarize, yes, you are. Perfect. The value creation comes in a number of areas within an organization, but as business people or as career people, we understand that it looks at the inputs, what it is that you are putting in, which could be your human resources, your other type of raw materials, the money that you are putting, information and knowledge, etc. And then the conversion of those inputs, meaning the processes, what is it that you do, how do you do it to effectively create the value? And then finally, the output. And for me, those key areas are what look at an impact on whether or not you are able to properly, effectively maximize those three to create value, thereby making your business sustainable, getting the dollar value at the end of your financial year. There are consequences of not properly managing this, or of managing some of those inputs, some of those processes. It's obviously the decline in whether or not you are able to implement your strategy as an organization, which in most instances we have found, and being an HR expert, and some of you who are online who are HR experts, then companies start going around saying, we need to change the structure. The culture is wrong. Let's do a culture survey. We need to go send people on training, and it's haphazard because the organization is not meeting its CAPEX at the end of the financial year. Obviously, it would result in losing clients. It would result in people that you want to maintain and keep in the organization becoming disengaged, and they leave for better positions, growing companies, and eventually not being able to sustain and loss of profit. And the organization, sometimes organizations die and they close up. Going back to what I said, the values, or rather the creation of value for a business, how I came up with and why I'm passionate about the effectiveness is I look at the three most important components. There's others that are important in business, but for me, the key for an organization to be able to leverage on those inputs, it is to look at the business structure. This doesn't only talk to the structure in terms of the levels in the business and your organogram, but it talks to, do we know what the risks are that talks to our business strategy? Do we have plans that talk within the entire organization, plans that talk to exactly who we are and where we want to go to as an organization? If we have those, are they talking to the current plan that we have or current HR that we have within the business? Is it looking at making sure that the effectiveness of our human resources is maximized, whether or not they have the right skills? Now, this is now breaking it down into your training plan, which we're not going to go into today. Another component is the internal processes. Are they enabling? Are they enabling our people, or are they a hindrance? There's so much red tape from the procurement of a product or service to the end. We have created such a lot of unnecessary steps that effectively affect how we get to the end product that we sell. So you look at those components not in isolation, but as a whole, and they have sub-components in there within which you would want to look at as you look at effectiveness. Now, I made in the beginning an inference and example to the difference between organizational efficiency and organizational effectiveness, where I indicated that efficiency looks at the end of the day, do we have the dollars that we anticipated we will get at the end of the day? So we measure that looking at the money that we've made, profit as it were. So for me, that is not enough, because it's not about the numbers. Yes, it is, bottom line, but again is, are we making an impact in the environment that we're working at? Are we making an impact in the lives of the people that we are selling this product or this service to? So that talks about my passion for organizational effectiveness. Going back to my previous slide, when I indicated that there is consequences to those. Now, one might cancel the other out. You might make money, but having a bad culture or a bad reputation in the market, which eventually will get you to a position where your organization doesn't improve, doesn't grow. At the beginning, it might look like, so who cares? The culture within the organization, people are not happy, people are not healthy, but we're making money. Eventually, it will cancel that money making out if those processes are not managed, they are not measured, and they are not improved upon. Right. Why am I going on about focusing on these three identified components, as it were? Everybody as a business wants to drive maximum value from what they put in to obviously then beat our competitors. But for us to do that, we need engaged employees, healthy employees who understand the business value, who are motivated who are empowered to drive the business strategy. We want them who, whether we develop them in-house or they come in with the expertise, the skills and competencies that make sure that they enable us to deliver on our strategy, thereby driving business performance. Why the focus, lastly, is we must make sure that those employees are engaged, are healthy, they have the skills and capabilities. But what about the processes? Because they could have those too. But if the processes, as I mentioned, are tedious, red tape, bureaucratic, they take up so much time, and there are aspects of those processes within the business that we can cut down on. We need to look at that as well. Hence, again, I'm overemphasizing the point, you can't look at one in isolation. It has to be holistic for you to maximize on measuring or creating a measurement of these particular organizational effectiveness that you decide on. Now, the question obviously, I suppose, on everyone's mind is, how do we then measure it? There's a number of tools, and the term that most human capital or HR specialists would use is organizational performance. I will talk about the difference later when I give you a synopsis of the tool that we use in my business. So you have to measure them, but it depends on what your strategic plan is. If you have properly outlined targets, short-term, medium, and long, it is important that your measurement of how effective your organization is speak to those. And I will elaborate further why I'm saying it is important. That's where it starts. As we all know, the core of your business doesn't start on whether or not you have a good people performance management system. It starts at the beginning. What is your strategic plan? What is it that you want to achieve? Then you break it down into those measurable components, not only for people, but for the business itself, on the areas that I will share later on. Now, I want to go on and share a sort of high-level OE process that I would sometimes look at. Okay. And there's other areas that a person might leverage on in terms of measuring these OE areas. Other people, like I indicated, that we are the best, we've made money, we've sort of outdone ourselves, we've grown by 20, 30%. At the end of the day, if some of those key three areas that we spoke about are lacking, that making money won't last and would not be sustainable in the long run. It's all and well that an organization needs to be highly effective, people need to be driven to perform. The question then that you'd want to ask yourself is, how should we quantify the effectiveness of an organization? Or, like I said, how do we measure it? Is it only the revenue? Is it the stock price? Or are there other ways that we look at, which is what the OE in the sense of effectiveness is going to highlight or helps us highlight. Now, you need to look at what matters for you as a business, for you to come up with a framework. After this slide, I will share a framework that I've used in some companies and in some because there are areas that they've identified as a hindrance to their strategy is different. So you would relook at how you put it in. Okay. Firstly, you would need to identify what it is that you want to measure. That would then talk to the tools that you're going to use. Those tools would obviously take into effect the three that we spoke about: your structures, your strategy, your processes, and obviously your people or your human capital, as it were. You map out your focus areas. You say, this is what our business strategy is, or our balanced scorecard in terms of where we want to be as a business, and this is what we currently have, and these are the challenges over the years that you've experienced in all those areas. Which areas? Your structure, the implementation of your strategy in terms of the processes, the people that you have to do that work, so you map it out in relation to those three and the challenges that you find. Why is number 3 for me critical? The identification of key stakeholders. and why a change plan. I will detail that later. But the identification of key stakeholders is this. You want to use leaders within this plan that understand the importance of driving that for their business unit. If you're a big entity, you would obviously have separate business units that look at that. If you're a small entrepreneur or a medium, small-sized business, you have maybe a project manager who is responsible for ensuring that he or she looks at the various project teams. So those people who are supposed to be driving the implementation of this OE plan are key because they need to know why they're driving it, what are the areas they need to be looking at and managing, and how are they going to effectively share this OE measurement or this OE process. I'm talking about including a change plan. Maybe some of you are saying, yes, HR people. It is key because a number of things will be changing as you are implementing your process. You are going to be measuring, you're going to be looking at a process of CI, continuous improvement, and people need to know the very people that you want to implement these changes must be kept in the loop. I cannot overemphasize the role of leadership or the people, the stakeholders will be driving this plan, because without making sure that people are engaged, they know. They will not be buy-in and you are as good as just putting it in file and putting it up on the shelf, they're displaying it. Lastly, because we need to measure, right? We have to agree on key principles that we're going to base this measurement on, and why we have to agree on them. Again, to point 3. Get people involved. They must know that the components of what you measure for their business units will change. That will obviously have an overall impact on the performance management of their people within those business units. So sitting and enabling them to have a say or an overview of what the process entails allows them to ask questions, allows them to say, we don't think that's a realistic measurement because in our unit, this is how we achieve results, this is what has happened, etc. So that is quite key. Right, I thought I will share an overview of an example of an OE framework. It's not completely entirely what one would use. It would depend on what the organization is seeking to look at. I'm talking about issues that look at the organizational development in its own culture, that look at the actual talent, the people who do the work. Are they engaged? Do they have the competencies that they're supposed to have to be able to effectively perform, thereby making the organization as effective as it should be? Is there a performance management plan, and is it talking to what the competencies are? Is it talking to what the effective management is going to count and look at once we do or want to get to the rand and cents or the dollar and cents value? Again, I included the change management aspect because, as I indicated, for me, it is key to keep those people. They must know, they must understand their role in the practices of OE. They need to understand how the impact of the implementation is going to be. The last bubble, leadership, and I highlighted development in red for a reason. We have managers who are excellent in terms of the technical aspects of their work, who are excellent in driving results, but there is that human component missing. Remember my 3. The person might be good in their processes. The person might understand the strategy, what we're driving as a business, where are we going to. But the person might not be a good people's person. So the development of making them understand how to lead and implement and work as role models in the effective implementation of this process is key. Develop them, share with them, let them understand their role in encompassing the entire or looking at the full process value instead of just saying, I'm driving people to follow the processes. But what is the impact of those processes on the people themselves? Is the impact of the processes that you're driving as a leader or a manager impacting on what you want to get to in terms of our business strategy? So you look at those, not in isolation, but in that order to make sure that you include them. It might look different in your company. You might have 3 because you have sold the strategy, everybody works, they understand the culture of organization, they're a happy bunch of people. But maybe the talent management aspect is lacking because maybe we're hiring graduates, they're coming fresh from school, so the issue of competencies is still underdeveloped. So we would then need to break down the talent management and look at the training and development aspect thereof. It might be because you have an organization that has a proper balanced scorecard that is all based on your bigger strategy, and that is what is communicated, but the management thereof is lacking. So you'd focus on change and driving the performance of that scorecard. Overall, you look at those things to improve the three: getting effective people, effective teams, and becoming an effective organization. Right. I'm sharing the focus area as an overview of the previous slide. As I said, it might be different because of what you would have identified in your organization as a number of different types of competencies or components that you want to look at to measure your. So I'm looking at this one in relation to the previous one. So on the issue of OD and culture, you would look at as key deliverables. For an example, what are the risk issues that affect our performance? I have in brackets an acronym there. I call it OHHCRA. When I share more about what we do at the end of the session, I will detail, because this is part of the tool that we use. In talent and processes, as a deliverable, you would look at developing an integrated talent management strategy that looks at the process, the systems. How do we get people in? How do we make sure there's a proper succession plan and develop? How do we share knowledge amongst those that might be leaving or senior in the organization to ensure that our talent pipeline is renewed, they've got the skills that they want? And how do we ensure that there are measurements in the talent management strategy? I'm not talking about performance, but I'm saying how do we measure the effectiveness of our talent management strategy? Hopefully one day we'll get to talk about talent management, but not today. Okay. Under the business and individual performance, you would look at what interventions from an HR point have been done or you're planning to do that will impact on this drive. What are operational processes that you're looking at changing or introducing that will help? You write those as your deliverables because they will impact on what it is that you will measure at the end. Under change, again, I can't overemphasize, there needs to be an approach and a framework that includes other people. We need to be able to ensure that people understand what the change is. How do we embed it in all the areas or processes within the business, be it from a process point or a people management point? Another deliverable for leadership that we look at is, do we have a specific leadership model that we look at for our junior managers, our middle, our senior? What are the competencies that we want them to have, the type of behaviors as managers that we want? Do we design managers that are just driven, who drive employees from 7 to 12 hours non-stop without understanding the impact of the employee well-being part in ensuring the organization is effective? Because that also plays a role. What type of leadership are we looking for? Because we need to get people who are able to drive the culture that we want to support our vision. Obviously, when you do your measurement and your deliverables, you would have what are the factors that you'll be able to see and tick off to say this is happening or this has happened, meaning we are working towards achieving all those deliverables. Is the organization having an environment, a culture that supports its vision and strategy, because everybody knows what it is about? Are we using processes that are lean? Are we using processes that are not cumbersome and expensive? Are there things that we could cut in the processes that we do from point input of our resources to output of our final product or service? What is it in between? I said pipeline of the talent. Do we have enough people to be able to drive and understand the processes that we need for all our business units? And obviously the policies, etc., that you need for you to be able as an organization to drive this too. That's important as a success factor. You look at another success factor. We need to have an environment that is people-centered. Unless we're just going AI, robotics, then we don't need people, then I suppose we can minus that out. But for now, I believe that it is critical as businesses to have an employee-centered culture. By that, I mean, what is it that we can do to make things easier? Simple things. Do we have flexible work schedules for moms, for dads who are single parents? What do we do that makes our people want to come to work, that makes our people want to stay engaged and they perform regardless, and they understand that there are certain times in the business where we have to drive a certain high level of performance because of the deadlines that we're supposed to meet or production levels at a certain period, etc. Is that culture that conducive so that when it's time for you to expect them to deliver and work hard, they do so without you having to break a sweat because they know how much you value and provide a conducive culture environment for them. So that is key. Yes, an agile organization, because you need one that is able to continuously renew. We are living in an age of innovation, and if there's going to be changes, whether to the processes, the structure, automation, technology, people need to be able to understand that it's going to happen and it's going to impact on how they do work today and how they will do work in the next 2, 3, 5 years. Build that into the plan. Build that into your discussions with your people. How visible is this leadership that we say it's critical to have leaders who are engaged, who are there? I wrote both change management and leadership development in black because my second last slide before I share my tool talks about those two. So are they living the values of the business? Are they showing that this is what the business represents, and me as a manager, as a leader, as an executive, I am living those values? Because that is, it enables people to say, oh, but my senior exec or my VP actually does this. Actually, they live these values. So it inspires people to do the same. Okay. The two slides in just an overall, for me, what principles help embed the process of organizational effectiveness from a leadership and change. It's to make sure that as a leader, we check out if those checklist principles or items, you want to call them, are in place. There are proper frameworks that I said at the beginning you will have to identify through what it is that you want to change, the methodology that you will use and system, the processes and policies that people need to follow are in place. The people are said, key stakeholders, they are enabled, they are capacitated to drive these initiatives, capacitated through training, sharing, involving them in workshops that prepares them for this. Talking about the leaders who are continuously developed as well to drive these change initiatives. And we don't leave change as a separate HR function that happens once in a while, we get emails. Change becomes part of who we are as a highly performing organization. We talk about it, we anticipate it in our next plan for the growth in the next financial year and so on. Communication, again, should be in the checklist. What are the structures? How are they going to be impacted on? How are we going to make sure that it is improved? So if you have a project office who is running the OE, make sure that those structures are there and they're continuously adapted. Alignment, like I said, how will you measure it if it's not aligned with other business processes as well as your balance scorecard or strategy, as it were? The ongoing talks, the ongoing changes and adaptation as you go along. Finally, for me, a tick box is to make sure that everybody within the business is educated on what it is that you're going to measure from a business balance scorecard and a personal balance scorecard. That is why, for me, it encompasses all those. I hope that I've made some sort of foundation for organizational effectiveness that makes sense. Andrea, I'm not sure if you want me to detail this now or we wait for questions. This tool on screen is an example of what I have termed the OHHCRA, which is what we use. These are just components. The tool is more detailed. I will show examples thereof, but I'm not sure if we first have to go back to what I've presented, answer questions on there before we move on to my example.
You still have around 15 minutes left, so I would recommend to continue. You don't have many questions, so I think we can continue with the explanation of this graph, and then I hope we can have more questions at the end.
That's fine. Thank you, Andrea. Before I go into detail why I came up with a specific tool, what it means, and what it means for me in terms of where I've used it for my clients. I've worked in HR, and the challenges of having to put interventions in place where performance of people, which obviously impact the organization's performance, is questioned. I have seen that it's all looked at in isolation in most companies. Like I said, people will be told that you are not following what we want as a manufacturing process if we are a manufacturing organization. Therefore, the performance review or your key performance areas and indicators must change. Sometimes other tools that people have looked at, like I indicated earlier, only look at the organization's performance in terms of rents and spends. So there would be control charts. There would be Pareto diagrams that look at what are the areas where there's bottlenecks, etc. I've used all those. Process mapping tools, for instance, because now we are just isolating processes as an issue of why we are not effective instead of looking at the whole. So I've tried most of those in the various organizations that I've worked for, but I still come to the fact that there's always one missing leg when you do these measurements. And I looked at the coined idea of organizational effectiveness as a tool that looks at a number of measurements, not in isolation, but together. Hence, I then decided this is what, or this is how I would like to look at for me. Apologies, there's an aeroplane flying over my office. It's past now. Thank you. Apologies for that. Therefore, I call this OHHCRA the organizational health, as in the organization itself, and human capital risk assessment. What do I mean by organizational health? I'm looking at what we spoke about, the culture, the processes within the organization. And it obviously still starts at the top, which is our strategy. How do we translate that in the culture that we live, in the processes that we employ within our business to translate our strategy? So that is the organizational health side. So I'm not talking just only about people here, but I'm talking about the organization itself in terms of how are we designed? Are we a high-tiered structure or more of a flat in terms now of proper OD, the design? And how does that affect the flow of information, the flow of processes? How does it affect how we get from input to output, etc.? That is what you'd assess. When you look at those assessments of the hazards, you see where the issues are. And your end value tells you that we spend more here, we have more issues with breakages of machines, etc. Whatever tools that you use, it tells you. So you would have those hazard assessments that you look at, and you put that in context. And obviously then later on when you actually do the risk management plan, you can identify what you want to fix, how you will measure that, and how much time and energy and who's going to be involved. That is when then you identify a gap, as I indicated on the side. What is it that the gap says? And you don't leave that only. You leave those gaps when you go to the right-hand side, where now you look at the capital. It's both your resources and the human resources. When I say the resources, I'm not saying I'm moving from the left where we're talking about processes, input, raw material, but your resources in relation to the people. Do they know how to utilize? Do they have the right capabilities as people? What is it that are gaps that are making the left-hand side, your processes, your environment, not match the right-hand side? So you look at those, not in isolation, together, and you put it in context as you identified gaps. Once you've done that, you link both to say this issue of, let's say, breakages in machines. We've bought these machines, they are new, we know how. So you look at the people side. Do they know how to use them? Were they trained? Are they continuously being, I would say, retrained or re-workshopped on the usage, how to maximize the use of that tool, etc. So you link the findings that you find from the left to the right or vice versa, because one is usually the impact of the other. And you do that and you put it all as your findings. And then you do what you call a risk response assessment. I will open an Excel spreadsheet after this so that I can just give you an overview of what I'm talking about the risk response, how we identify those hazards, etc. And then you characterize them in order of importance and in order of the impact they have on your business, the impact they have on the performance of your business, the impact they have on your overall effectiveness as an organization. You would put them like that. And then obviously review, check, like I said, manage change, identify people. It's part of that risk categorization, because we will say, these are the people, these are the issues, these are the departments that need to be changed, and then we're going to work on the how when we get to the actual risk management plan. I indicated earlier and I said CI, what is my continuous improvement? We need to do a review and reality check. Was our sample correct on top there when we're identifying these hazards or these areas of concern? Was it just because it's March, and March is our quiet month or our busy month, hence the machines were breaking? So you need to continuously have a review and reality check of whether or not the environment we're in, this assessment was happening, is realistic, or is in its nature talking to what your business is on a 12-month scale. So you would look at an overall or take snapshots when you do these assessments on your busy periods, on your not so busy periods, etc. Now, with your permission, I want to show you an example of I hope I've opened it, an example of a spreadsheet that looks at the organizational health metrics. I'm not sure if this is clear. Can you see this from your side under the Excel spreadsheet?
Yes, we can see it fine.
Okay. Yes, you can. Perfect. So this is an example of what you would look at. You would obviously to change, because at the top when you're developing your matrix, you identified key components that you want to look at. Things like what are the health risks in this case. For this particular client, they were looking at mostly people, because their issue was absenteeism. The people had all the training, they had effective machines, but people were just always ill. You know, there was an issue with their health. So the assessment was around this. So you would look at those. Is it the issue that people are sick? Is it the physical environment? Is it the mental well-being? So they would put that according to, you would formulate a spreadsheet. We do this in our OHHCRA as part of our offering to the plan. It would look at the physical environment, the health of the people themselves, if an issue is obviously non-performance of people, or the identified issue is obviously maybe disengaged staff. So we would look at and zoom in to the people component of this. And obviously you get a score, and score would look at the issues. In this case, it was governance, management, and other areas that look, as I indicated, the assessment of health risk, the health status, because the issue in this particular client of mine was the staff turnover and overall disengaged employees. So this forms an example of what areas you would look at, and would design different tabs, obviously, to say who's doing the report, which company are looking at, etc., and you get a score based on the areas that we had identified here. When I move back to the presentation of the OHHCRA, when I move back to this one, you would have found where the risk response area is that you want to assess. And we design the plan based on those areas as indicated. Lastly, because Andrea said I still have time, I want to give an overview of what my tool is. I know I've explained it in detail between the left and right. I just want to give a summary of what it is for somebody who doesn't know what, or obviously it's my own coined tool or assessment. But what it does It provides objective information based on the risk that the business has identified, be it the structure, the processes, or the human capital engagement. Human capital engagement can talk to the talent pipeline, the succession planning that you have, the actual employee well-being, and the programs that you have for people. Your processes, like I said earlier, we talk to, are they tedious, are they too long, are they overcomplicated, etc. So I will put that in to look at. Okay, so let me do this as a, yeah, like that, it's better. So the high-level context of my OHHCRA, we can either use your balance scorecard information, the financial performance. If you've done previous culture survey results, we use that. So we don't always go and just go in and start saying we'll start with a culture assessment, etc. We can use historic information that you have and you trust that is valuable for us to look at in view and including what you have yourself as a business through our facilitation method identified as your challenges. And this doesn't only look at that, but it looks at, are we working with our competitors in terms of getting what we want to achieve as a business? What is our plan going forward? So the organizational health risk tool doesn't only look at people and doesn't only look at processes, but it encompasses all those areas. Again, with an emphasis at the end, how do we measure those? Because it is critical, right? You can't spend money having an external consultant come and take your staff and your business units through this when we are not able to measure and identify how this has succeeded. I said from the understanding, a beginning point, your strategy, the current stakeholders, the challenges that you have, you would look at. The identification of hazard talks about the design. Is it the issue because we are a flat structure or an over-complex structure? Is it projects within HR that are impacting on people performing? Is it the interventions that we planned previously that were not measured correctly, that did not speak to what you wanted to achieve? Is it our human capital capabilities? And maybe we're implementing too many things. So there is an intervention clash where there's a process change, and this side we are looking at changing our org structure, so there is a clash somewhere. So what is the hazard? And we identify it like that. We look at the possible risks, the level of exposure. Too high will cost the business money, will cause us to lose people, etc. You do that as a whole when you assess the possibility of what the hazard is. The risk response. What are the challenges that we might find when we are implementing these changes or in those identified areas? So you have to continuously, as I said, review and reevaluate the environment within which you assess these before you go on to your final plan. And we obviously we look at methodology. I'm not going to go into detail with that. And this is it from my side. If there are any questions, I know that I still have 5 minutes, I think, but if there are any questions, I'll be glad to take them now.
Thank you, Cindy. That was very interesting. Yeah, we do have some questions. Carol wants to know if the OHHCRA tool would work for a small organization.
Absolutely, it works. Why I'm saying it works across organizations, it's because of the simplicity nature of the tool. All organizations have processes that they employ in doing, whether they sell chains made out of beads, whether they sell handbags that are hand-woven, or they're a complex IT process. It would work because there's a process involved. There are people who undertake those processes, and there is a final business scorecard or plan that they're looking towards, regardless of the size.
Great, thank you. Another question, how do I get disengaged employees to start focusing on career growth as opposed to monetary rewards?
Again, what are the issues with the disengagement? Are they finding, because we need to, before we even answer the question, how do I get people better excited about working here? we need to first go back and identify what are the issues that are making them disengaged. Do we have long, tedious hours? Are they simply bored with a monotonous type of work environment and they are driven to do something better elsewhere? Or it's just the fact that they feel they want more money? Sometimes I always say to my clients, if the kind of people that we have, after identifying them, giving them a succession plan, showing them that you have a career growth plan for them, they still want to leave, let them go. Because not everybody is driven by excitement and working hard to achieve something and say, I'm adding value. It might just be money and there's nothing you can do. But in most instances, people who are disengaged, it's just not even the part of money. It's the environment within which they are operating or required to operate. It is the leadership abilities or how they interact with the leadership. Are they involved in key processes and trends, or they are just told, run with this, do that, now we've changed the system, we expect you to do it. Now, if you find a driven person, that's one of the reasons why I started my business. You want somebody to be able to hear you out, to value your input as an individual. That excites me, and that's what has kept me in some companies for longer than others. So it is not a one-answer-fit-all to how you motivate people, but you need to look at what causes the demotivation. I hope that answers a bit of your question.
I hope it does. If not, Carol, please feel free to type in additional follow-up questions. Another question. So leadership is very important, and this kind of soft engagement is very important. But what other type of incentives do you think a small company can put in place that are not necessarily monetary, that can have engaged employees?
I made an example in passing to say, create an environment that makes a person feel, you know what, in my work there's flexibility of work hours. So I know that as much as we are driven and expected to perform in certain times of the year to effectively meet client deadlines and targets, but we are given the freedom to come to work or work from home, or the employer is providing a space for us to be able to be creative in how we come up with solutions to our projects. So keep people engaged and informed by enabling them to bring an alternative to what you want or to what processes are there in the business, as long as obviously they are within law and they do not cost your business money or risk. So get them feel as part of, let them feel as though they own the organization. I have 7 employees. I'm making an example myself. I'm a small business, but I let my team run with things the way they see fit. There are processes to follow. They know if we're looking to source a provider, there should be quotations and stuff. But I allow them to think outside the box. I allow them to decide that on a Friday we want to knock off early because we've finished planning for the week, etc. There's a flexibility that keeps them excited about working here other than giving them more money in a number of ways. I provide a space for my employees to play games. It's something that's there because then they unwind and they get to talk about a social part of work when they are still at work, if you know what I mean. So provide an environment that enables them to be flexible enough to love coming to work, so that when they have to be driven by deadlines, they do it freely and excitedly so, not because you're going to pay them for the overtime, but because they love doing it and being there. Okay?
Yes, thank you so much, Cindy. I don't know if anybody would like to ask the last question. We have, would it be possible to share the documents? Well, we're going to share the video recording. It's going to be uploaded to our YouTube channel, and it is going to share through an email. So that is information that you will have. In case there are more additional questions, I will also send a follow-up email. And if you would like to establish a connection with Cindy, you can always do so by sending an email, or I can just facilitate the connection. Is there any other questions? If not, I think this was very, very helpful, Cindy. Let me see, I might have another one. Give me just 1 second. No, I think that's all.
Okay.
So this was very interesting. Thank you so much, Cindy. I don't know if you would like to just close with something else.
I would just like to say that they are more than welcome, as we indicated, to speak to me outside this. But in closing, I would like to say that it is not an expensive process. You don't have to do a consultation process with myself. As an organization, there should be issues that you look at as key in ensuring your sustainability, and that is where you can start to map up a framework of what it is that you can do to drive your own effectiveness. So it can be as simple as that, where maybe you don't want to measure it in rands and cents and percentages, but you know that these are the key issues that in the past, because of your history, have made you succeed or not, and you can start working to improve from those in consultation with your staff. That's all from my side.
All right. Thank you so much, Cindy, and thank you so much for all our attendees. I hope you all enjoyed it. And as I said, I will share a link to the recording of this webinar and also share some information about how to connect with Cindy. Thank you, Cindy.
Thank you so much for also allowing me the opportunity and space. And thank you for the interviews to making time in their busy schedule to listen to me.
Yes, for sure. Thank you so much. Have a great day, everyone.
You too. Bye-bye.